Galina, I appreciate you for agreeing to take part in our program. It's no coincidence that you became the guest of our program dedicated to the art of sculpture in Kazakhstan. Here I have a unique publication about the sculpture art of Kazakhstan from Kosteyev Museum, and you were the one to put it together. To start the conversation, I'd like to ask you about the initial stage of the formation of sculpture art in Kazakhstan. What were the preconditions for the development of this phenomenon, and what names were associated with this process? We can say that the history of the art of sculpture in Kazakhstan began in the 1950s. The first national sculptor, Khakimzhan Nauryzbayev, played an important role in this process. In 1951, he graduated from the Kharkov Art Institute. He returned to Kazakhstan and organized a sculpture department in local art school. This was the base, the foundation, yes, for future development. The sculptors who worked during this period created an excellent gallery of notable people of our republic. These are, of course, people of science, culture, heroes of labor. Those were artists: Khakimzhan Nauryzbayev, Bek, Tulekov, Isayev, Urmanche, to name a few. In 1950s, 60s, they worked in the best traditions of Russian Soviet sculpture.
Начало 60-х годов они работали в лучших традициях русской советской скульптуры.
We talk a lot about the role of Khakimzhan Nauryzbayev, since he was not only a talented sculptor, whose works were included in the Golden Fund of the Cultural Treasury of Kazakhstan, but also he was an educator who founded a professional school of sculpture. The next generation after Nauryzbayev. What is so special about this generation? In the late 60s, 70s and 80s, a new generation came to art of sculpture. In that period, this art form was becoming widespread and massive wave of young craftsmen came forward. We can identify some differences. And the most talented among them were graduates of Russian schools of art. For the most part, they were educated at our art school. Back then it was named after Nikolai Gogol. Many of them later raised their professional level in Moscow and Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. For example, Yorkin Mergenov graduated from the Moscow Surikov Institute. This helped push the boundaries of his perception of sculpture as a form of art, and of course this was reflected in his work and the work of other artists.
И, конечно, это отразилось и в его творчестве, и в творчестве других художников.
Tracing the historical development of sculpture art in Kazakhstan in retrospect, how would you describe this phenomenon, its specific features? The art of sculpture is also developing in line with global trends, which is very important. In general, the art of Kazakhstan is open to the world. Therefore, our artists, sculptors in particular, are actively adopting global trends. Since the 1960s, when the artistic community was attracted to the idea of the national identity and authenticity of fine arts of our republic, tendencies shifted towards the study of folk art. Artists manifested this in their own way. Some relied on plots, thematic aspects of their works, and some used artifacts from folk art, reflects them through the needs of modern times. The main thing is that sculptors never stay in one place. They are in constant search, experimenting. We can see this in their work.
Скульпторы не стоят на месте, они в поиске, они в эксперименте, и это мы, конечно, видим по их творчеству.
Одно из замечательных произведений.
One of the remarkable works of Nauryzbayev is the image of Kurmangazy, an outstanding Kazakh musician. I would like you to tell us how does a master fill the material and reveal the image of a person using the properties of the material of choice.
Используя свойства материала.
На мой взгляд, это лучший портрет Kurmangazy в его иконографии. То есть, если брать живопись.
In my opinion, this is the best portrayal of Kurmangazy in his iconography. That is, if we are talking about graphic art and painting, because in fact, Nauryzbayev managed to convey the process of creativity. He depicts our hero with a slight tilt of his head. At first glance, it seems that the expression on his face is very stern, but in fact he listens to the steppe wind, to the trampling of horses, chirping of birds, all these sounds that he transformed into his music. And it seems to me that with such a compositional decision, the sculptor achieves an understanding of whole picture. And of course I would like to draw your attention to how this sculpture was made. Because for a sculptor, the connection between the image and the material from which this image is created is very important. And here we see how from a block of marble that symbolizes the native land, native steppe, country, gradually as the stone is processed, the image of a genius personality is taking shape. And this rough bottom part is a connection with his homeland, which gave birth to genius, inspired him to compose, to create.
Породила гения и вдохновляет его на музыкальные произведения.
Some sort of foundation, base. And of course, in order to demonstrate the subtlety of the spiritual organization of this person, his sensitive perception of the world. So the sculptor allows a very careful, I would say, delicate processing of marble. He polishes it and brings to perfection facial features of this person.
И доводит до совершенства портретные черты этого человека.
The musical theme continues in the work of Nauryzbayev in the sculpture of young Jambel. A young man born in the steppe glorifies the beauty of his native nature. The instrument in his hand becomes the embodiment of his voice. Freedom, spatial solution of the figure, amazing striving of the young man into the distance, into the endless expanses of his native steppe, his natural habitat that inspires him. This connection with nature, all this, is embodied in this amazing work. The poet is portrayed almost in full size, and we, the audience, become direct participants in the action taking place, imbued with the inspiration that the young talented musician experiences. In 1980, Rizbek Akhmetov creates his composition in 4 parts. He chooses shamot as the main material. Shamot is a material with amazing properties. Its mottled structure resembles the sandy texture of the steppe, its dunes. Its color seems to have been born by the steppe itself, and it's no coincidence, having chosen this material, its shade, the artist turns precisely to the topic of nomadism. The 4 parts of the composition create a sense of harmony and balance, because 2 of them represent feminine theme, the other 2 masculine. The masculine theme is actively revealed through the images of horsemen, while the feminine theme is revealed through the images of women who are in close proximity with their domestic animals. One of them has a children's theme, because there's a bag thrown over the back of the camel, and the children of this woman are sitting in that bag. This generational relationship, amazing naivety and kindness, the warmth emanating from these sculptures makes them incredibly charming. The composition is minimalist. An interesting feature of this composition is that it can be created in different ways. It's like a constructor transformer that can be played in different ways, rotated, combining figures into different accords. And it is interesting that shamot, a very popular material in Soviet times, was used both in smaller sculptures and in large monumental forms. Shemot also appears in other sculptures by Rizbek Akhmetov, in particular in the composition Pouring of Kumis. Olga Prokopieva studied together with Tolygen Dosmagomedov at the Repin Leningrad Institute of Painting, Sculpture and Architecture. They were tied by the fate. They formed a creative family duo. Both of them preferred metal, creating sculptural compositions. Both brilliantly coped with the sculptural portrayal of real persons. Subsequently, their names were inscribed in the history of Kazakh fine art. Olga Prokopieva creates an absolutely wonderful sculpture of the opera singer, who received the status of the best Figaro of the country. This was Jibek Serkibayev in the famous role of Rossini's opera The Baba of Seville. Please note that the artist, in order to convey the spirit of the era, completely avoids straight lines in the composition. The free arrangement of the figure in space, intrinsic details and elements, a rose in the hand, an intricate jabot, curved chair legs, all this somehow refers to the Rococo era, immersing the viewer both in this historical period and in the atmosphere of an extraordinarily exciting and fascinating opera with a brilliant performance of Jibek Serkibayev in the main role. In the composition The Horseman, Nurlan Dalbay creates a somewhat unusual image. What is interesting is that we could see the dialogue with the international culture, with international sculpture, with its classical rules and images. But at the moment of deconstruction, which is present both in the image of an animal and in the image of a horseman, in many ways it evokes the solution of philosophical questions and problems. Because this is a reflection of the internal conflicts of a person and society. This is a reflection of the period, on the events that take place in it. It's interesting that Nurlan Dalbay is known not only as a master of experimental sculpture. He is the author of urban monumental sculpture, in particular image of Mukagali Makatayev in the center of Almaty. He also created the image of Abelhan Kosteyev. The sculptural composition, which was opened in 2004, in the centenary year of the people's artist Abelhan Kosteyev, is one of the symbols of our wonderful museum.
Оскар Есенбаев получил блестящее академическое образование в Московском институте имени Сурикова. Вообще, это художник, который трепетно обращается...
Oskar Yesenbayev received an excellent education at the Surikov Moscow Art Institute. This is an artist who refers to the art culture of the entire world. He examines classic designs. He is extremely demanding of himself, always striving for excellence, and sometimes he reaches it. He often comprehends biblical stories. In his portrait images, he moves away from the direct photographic character of the image, striving to create a portrait allegory, a portrait metaphor. Portrait Soleil is exactly that.
Густая копна волос которых является словно бы условной завесой от внешнего...
A portrait of a fragile, sophisticated young woman. Thick hair represents some sort of veil from the outside world, hiding her face, her inner world, her spiritual aspirations, her thoughts. It is surprising that the artist creating this image plays on contrasts, slim figure and thick hair. Contrast of materials, cold bronze and warm wood are organically combined. It's surprising that we can read the duality present in this composition, the multipolarity of the world, because everything in the world is ambiguous. And the artist reflects on this.
Наверное, прочитывается и разнополярность мира, потому что все в мире неоднозначно. И, наверное, об этом размышляет художник.
Edward Kazaryan entered the limelight of the artistic arena back in the early 1990s and continues to work actively to this day, giving preference to sculpture. The main material of his choice is bronze. Moreover, today he creates sculptures that fit into the urban space, giving preference to monumental forms. He is successful in creating both studio and monumental sculptures. The collection of our museum contains his composition named Family. The family theme is one of the key ones for Edward Kazaryan. Since he is very caring about his own family, to him this is the main spiritual, ethical value that unites people. It is no coincidence that this is expressed by visual means in the composition: parents, children, a boy and a girl. They all combined into a single whole. The composition is dominated by the line. This main outline, as it moves, creates light, lacy effect. This quality is characteristic of many of Edward's works. He simplifies the image by reducing it to a symbol. Everything is cleared of unnecessary details to express the general idea. In this case, it is the moment of unity of family members with each other. It is expressed in a laconic but comprehensive form, which the artist has embodied in bronze. Erkin Mergenov is a master who is well known not only in Kazakhstan but also abroad. His sculptural compositions are sometimes ambiguous, sometimes provocative, because they combine a variety of very different images from different historical eras, from different contexts, and when they are combined into a single composition, the artist seeks to express the most diverse philosophical reflections about time, person, and about himself. Such is the composition named Encounter. There is an unexpected combination in a single context of images of different times and different polarities in their semantic content. We see a woman of the East. Please note that the face inside the kamishek is blank. There is no face. The artist deliberately avoids being tied to a specific image, avoids giving this figure distinct features. It is the image of the ancient personified East, represented by this woman, and it blends seamlessly with the life-size bike. What does this encounter mean? Meeting of the past and the present, West and East, modernity and antiquity. Is this an organic dialogue, or does he express an inner conflict? When we look at the work of Mergenov, there are more questions than answers. The need to involve the viewer in the search for semantic connections is what Mergenov does in his work. In fact, he became one of the first sculptors who outlined the tendencies of postmodernism in Kazakhstani sculpture. And of course, this is what is happening in contemporary sculptural art. And of course, Mergenov is one of the most mysterious figures of our time. This acquaintance with the works of outstanding sculptors of Kazakhstan, with wonderful works of art, allowed us to trace the evolution of Kazakhstani sculpture, the specificity of working with certain materials, the movement from realistic representation of life to philosophical postmodern avant-garde experiments. All this manifested itself in the best examples of Kazakhstani sculpture, which are carefully preserved in the State Museum of Arts named after Abulhan Kosteyev.